Two friends just made a podcast. Two good friends just made a podcast. Two friends just made a podcast. It's called Culture Bucket. Two friends just made a podcast. Two good friends just made a podcast. Two friends just made a podcast. Culture Bucket, Georgia and Alex.
All right, hello, and welcome back to Culture Bucket. You're with your hosts, George and Alex. Hi, Alex.
Hi, George. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
How are you, George?
I'm ill,
Yeah.
but never mind. But we're pushing through because I can't transmit any disease through podcast medium, so it's perfectly safe. Please don't, rip your earphones out in panic or anything. You can't get what I've got, and what I've got is a very minor cold.
Oh,
yeah,
poor G.
But I've spent the weekend feeling sorry for myself either way. And you might hear me clear my throat. I'll try and avoid too much of that. I do apologise. Although it's apt for today's discussion. On account of the amount of sort of throat trauma that is inflicted on the on the singer in the band that we're going to be talking about by himself, self-inflicted throat trauma. Anyway, I'm rambling. This is episode number 56. Last week we had a wonderful discussion about Dune that was so much fun, and this week we're going to be discussing one of my favourite bands, or my favourite band. That band being the Bristolian post-punk band IDLES.
Yeah, from my favourite city in the UK.
Yes, one of the best. Up there with Sheffield, which I love, but Bristol is also great.
Yeah.
And, birthed the IDLES, or just IDLES as they would prefer to be known. And they have just released their fourth studio album called Crawler.
Yes. But very soon after the Ultra Mono, which I didn't realise until I was reading today.
Yeah, like 4 albums in 4 years kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is, or just like 4.5 years. It's pretty wild stuff that they've decided to be so prolific, and also, pushed their sound forwards quite a lot in just the space of a year, because this album is, whether you like it more or less than Ultramono, we can all agree that it is very different to Ultramono.
You're giving it away. We've just started. And that's the end of the episode.
What? That it's different?
Yeah.
Yeah. It is a very different album. So we're going to be talking about it. We'll go through it track by track and discuss our thoughts on each song on the album and how they're different. And also, I think, define what the sort of concept is. Because I think more than Ultramono, this album has a sort of key concept at the core of it, and an idea that's being explored throughout its runtime. And a sort of journey as such that it takes you on, which is cool. So, we'll be talking about it, and we'll start right now. I've got a list for you, Alex.
Yes.
You can tell me what this is a list of and why it's relevant to our discussion today. Hunky Dory by David Bowie, A Night at the Opera by Queen, Let There Be Rock by AC/DC, Darkness on the Edge of Town by Bruce Springsteen, Tommy by The Who, Blue by Joni Mitchell, Rust in Peace by Megadeth, Remain in Light by Talking Heads, Kid A by Radiohead, 808s and Heartbreaks by Kanye West, 2112 by Rush, Bleed American, Jimmy Eat World, Super Unknown by Soundgarden, Everything Must Go, Manic Street Preachers, Viva La Vida by Coldplay, and Justice for All by Metallica, Puzzle by Biffy Clyro, Red by Taylor Swift, and Boxer by The National. What are they all examples of?
Albums.
No, not just albums.
Just a second. I think I got it. Fourth albums of artists.
Yes.
Fourth albums by artists.
Fourth albums, and also albums that are largely considered classics in the canon of those artists. and many of them considered all-time classics.
Did you come up with this by yourself?
Well, I researched and found lists of
Amazing.
albums and stuff like that. Yeah,
that's pretty cool, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a lot of classic albums in there, right? You've got stuff like 808s and Heartbreak by Kanye. Super Unknown is that iconic Soundgarden. But Darkness on the Edge of Town is one of Bruce Springsteen's best. A Night at the Opera is like Queen's album. And I got to thinking, like, what is it that defines a fourth album? Because so often, the debut album, that's the first time you're hearing the band, the first time anyone's hearing them and they're putting out their first sort of music and seeing what people like. The second album tends to be the one where they take a little bit of a slump quite often, where they sort of say, well, people liked this, let's give them more of that. And they might not maybe have as much in the tank as they think, and it sort of falters a bit. Yeah. Then album 3 tends to be where they regroup, reconvene, and maybe try something different. And then the fourth album tends to be, this is the one where they are now, for the first time, they feel like an established group. They're not a new band anymore. Yeah. And all the things they've tried over the preceding 3 albums, they'll bring together, decide what they want to keep and decide where they want to go as a band. And I think you can see that through a few of these examples. Something like Puzzle by Biffy Clyro is the album that made them big after 3 sort of different albums. Red by Taylor Swift, which we've all been listening to recently as she's re-released it. That's the first proper album where she became a crossover pop star and wasn't, moved on from being a kind of country singer. Kid A by Radiohead, we talked about them last week. That's probably the most iconic fourth album journey of all time in a way. It's nothing like what they've done previously. And here we have IDLES with Crawler. Is it going to belong alongside these other sort of iconic, famous fourth albums?
Probably, yeah. Well, we'll discuss it now.
We'll discuss it now. This album was produced during the pandemic. It was co-produced by Bowen, a member of the band, and Kenny Beats, a sort of rising, primarily hip-hop producer, who has come in and just sort of helped them focus on, I guess, good songwriting, quality songwriting, and not being defined by genre. Like Kenny Beats isn't defining himself as a hip-hop producer here, and the IDLES aren't defining themselves as a sort of loud, shouty band that people might think of themselves as in the past. Which is interesting. What did you think prior to hearing the album, prior to going into it? What were your sort of expectations?
Well, I really liked Ultramono, and I liked the journey they have been going on. And so I didn't have high expectations. I wasn't going to be like, if this is a bad album. I knew that I would have to listen to it a few times. Because I think that's what you have to do with a band like IDLES. You can't just listen to the album once and then go, I've listened to it. So I knew that this week was going to be IDLES week. So I wasn't sure if I was going to, because I really liked Ultramono, but I because I don't read much before I do things, I just always go in with and I listened, with an open mind, but I also listened to the single a few months ago, or a month ago. When did it come out? A month ago, maybe.
6 weeks before the album.
Yeah, 6 weeks ago. And I really liked the single. So, I had... Good...
Did you listen to Car Crash before
No.
you heard it on the album? No, so you... Right, okay, interesting.
No.
Cool, nice.
How did you feel before embarking in the IDLES journey of the
excited, obviously. Surprised, because Ultramono, they announced it like pre-summer, June or July time, and then it was out end of September, so it was quite a long wait, 2 or 3 months, and they put out what almost amounted to, I think, half of the album as singles. So Ultramono felt a little bit like a known quantity when it came out last year. And I mean, I really like Ultramono. It's a good album with like a lot of good songs on it. And it very much is the IDLES album where they did the ultimate version of what they were known for, which is kind of loud, brash, sloganeering, issue kind of songs about different issues and that kind of thing, which is interesting. Whereas this one, there was not really any prior warning that they had an album coming. There was just suddenly one day, Radio 6 announced that they had IDLES on to interview and that they were going to be making an announcement. And it was an album suddenly out of nowhere that was due out in just 6 weeks. And they only put out 2 singles before the release of it this time. So I think they learned from some of the mistakes of last time, and not necessarily mistakes, but last time with the release of Ultramono, it was this huge campaign to try and get them a number 1 album. They really wanted to have a number 1 album because it does open doors and kind of affects the rooms you can play as a band, etc., to have a number 1 album. So they achieved that with Ultramono, and they put a lot of effort into getting that number 1, and that was where all the singles came from, I think, in the big promotional lead up. And I think with this album, they probably felt a bit free in terms of not really feeling the need to have another number 1. And just letting the album speak for itself. And they released it in a week where Taylor Swift put out Red, Rod Stewart put a new album out, Ed Sheeran had just put out that new album of his, Adele's album is out the following week. Like, they put it out in the middle of these huge titanic behemoths, almost saying, we know we're not going to get number 1 this time. Like, no one's going to move Taylor Swift from the number 1 position.
No.
And then, like, any momentum that they would get going forwards, if it built up week by week, would just be destroyed by Adele the following week. So it was kind of probably a bit freeing, really, for them to just not really worry about that. So, 6 weeks, 2 singles, and then the album came out, and all I really knew about it before listening to it was that it was different, which I was sort of excited about. And he'd talked a lot about, when announcing the album, Joe Talbot, the lead singer, had talked a lot about that it's about addiction, and it's about the cycle of addiction, and that it was partly inspired by an experience he had on the motorway one night where a motorbike overtook him at, say, 120, 130 miles an hour, just half a foot away from the side of his car. And it made him consider how fragile life is, how easily, it could all fall apart in a second if something had gone wrong there. That motorbike, if it had hit him, the motorcyclist would have died. He'd have probably died. Yeah. And that kind of inspired the album. In particular, the first track on the album is, about that event. Yeah. And that was what I knew going in, along with a sort of a little short poem that's printed on the album cover, at least for one version of the album, that also kind of appeared in various articles about it. So I don't know if you'll have seen this poem or know it, or I don't know if it's even a poem. Anyway, I'll read it out, and then that's kind of everything that we knew before we heard the album. So it goes, I was on my knees, but I was not begging nor praying. I was just getting by, and I survived my traumas and the savage bastard cycle of addiction by half a whisker. Survival isn't just the end release of centred jubilation. It's all the ugly, vicious and lonely steps along the way. I look back now and see just how beautiful life is. To recover is beauty, but to be carried by the embrace of care and luck is ecstasy. I am grateful, I am a crawler, I am alive. All is love. So that's printed on certainly one version of the album that I've seen. Yeah. And it's not lyrics from the album, it seems to be some sort of intro idea for the album, I guess. Had you heard that before or seen that?
Well, I'm just on a Genius, the website Genius, and I just read it now whilst you were reading. So, yeah, I didn't.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
Interesting. It is very beautiful. And sort of immediately highlights that this album is much more. Would you agree? Like, it's much more poetic, and sort of the lyrics are much more introspective, maybe, than previous work.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a shift in this album, which the more I listen to it, the more I enjoyed listening to. Yeah, whilst in Ultra Mono, it was more about repetition and making kind of the same sound and a lot of like lyric repetition, which I liked. Of course, I really like that album. I feel like this one, the more you listen to it, the more you understand what's going on, and the more the songs become really meaningful and beautiful. Yeah.
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 No, definitely.
There's not much joy in this album.
No, it's quite a dark album.
Yeah.
Definitely. Although there's a line that they've used a lot in the promotional material that is repeated in the final track that kind of I think it finds some form of joy
towards the end. Yeah.
towards the end, yeah, because it's definitely a journey of an album where it starts in a very dark place and
Yeah.
moves through and tries to avoid the cycle of going back to the start, which is interesting. So before we get into talking about these songs in total, it's probably worth noting that there's a Consequence of Sound article where Joe Talbot and I think he's called what's his name? I'm embarrassed if I get it wrong. Mark Bowen and Joe Talbot in this Consequence of Sound article go through each track one by one and sort of say, give their feelings on the track. So I read that in advance of this episode, and we'll be using some sort of ideas that I got from that probably in our discussion. So that I'll put the link to that in the show notes. It's worth reading. It's a good article. And also Genius. I think we're both probably going to be using Genius because it's a good resource for lyrics and things.
I never used Genius before. I've watched their YouTube videos, which I enjoy watching, because sometimes there's some really great ones and sometimes there's some awful ones, and I quite enjoy watching the awful ones. But I never, because we've never discussed an album song by song. I was like, how are we going to do this? And so I went on Genius, and it's amazing.
It's a great resource, and people annotate the lyrics and all sorts. It's really good. I love Genius. So, shall we get into it? Shall we talk about the first track?
Yes, please.
MTT 420RR is the title of the opening track.
Yeah.
I only just yesterday bothered to go and find out what that is. Do you know what that means?
Is it a kind of motorcycle?
Yeah, it's the name of a super bike. RR stands for race ready, so I think it's supposed to be the model of motorbike that overtook Joe on the highway, on the motorway.
Yeah, because I was everybody loves, of course I'm in Italy, everybody loves motorcycles, and like it's not an exaggeration. Most people I know own a motorcycle.
Bonkers. As an opening track, it's pretty different to their previous opening tracks. If you think about a song like Heel off Brutalism, Colossus off Joy's an Act of Resistance, they're both songs that kind of build and then kind of have a big breakdown and build to a point where everything kind of goes crazy. War on Ultramono, similar to how that album operates, that song just starts at the crazy point and doesn't really give up. This one builds and builds and builds, but never gives you the release. It just goes. Yeah. And it's a very different way for them to open an album they haven't done before. Lyrically, it is exploring the incident that inspired the album, the motorbike overtaking Joe on the motorway, with a first verse that mixes kind of really unpleasant imagery with quite funny imagery, which is quite Idol standard style. Do you know what degloved means? There's a line where he says he was degloved. Do you know what that is?
No.
So it's a medical term for when, and this is a trigger warning, this is quite unpleasant, for when flesh and skin is ripped wholesale from somebody's body, as in taking off a glove. And it's a very common occurrence in motorcycle crashes, I believe. Friction, etc. It's caused by extreme friction. So that's an immediately quite unpleasant image, and he follows it up immediately with the next line. He was jelly roll, which is obviously the image of jam all over the place, which is interesting. And then it builds. He starts talking about spinal cords, ripping and glass raining down, and quite unpleasant, dark, brutal imagery, all based around the idea of a car crash. And then it just goes into this repeated line of, "Are you ready for the storm?" Yeah. The first time I don't know about you, but the first time I heard this song, I assumed that the storm was gonna arrive, that his voice would get louder and louder and louder, and then he would be screaming the line. But it doesn't. It just ends. What do you think? What's your take on this track? What do you think of this track?
Well, it's as a track. The first time I heard the album, I completely forgot that this track existed. And then I
really?
listened to it again, and the more I listen to this track, the more amazing it becomes, and the more powerful "Are You Ready for the Storm" becomes, because it doesn't go as loud as it usually does, but
No, he
it is
keeps it very
pretty.
low.
But it's pretty like spine tingling. Because it carries on saying, "Are you ready for the storm?" And the more I listened to it, the more it became one of probably my favorite track of the album.
Wow.
Just because it's so different for them, but it's a song that has grown on me so much, and I've had moments where I've gone back and listened to it again when I started the album. And so I listened to it like twice, and then I listened to the rest of the album. And if you listen to the album just once, like I said, I completely forgot it was like it didn't even register in my mind, this song, the first time I listened to it.
Because it doesn't really have a chorus or a hook or
no
anything that would make it stick in your mind after one listen. It just sort of passes by almost. But yeah, you're right that it sort of builds each time you hear it.
Yeah.
And hooks into you. I've seen people comparing it a lot to like a Massive Attack track or some sort of trip hop. It's very electronic.
But it's an amazing song. Yeah.
Yeah, and an amazing bike. So
yeah, MTT20. Have you checked what kind of bike it is?
Yeah, it's like a stupid, racing bike thing. It looks like a spaceship.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh goodness. Yeah, it's one of those.
Yeah.
They cost like the same amount of a car. Like, if you have this and a car.
I'm surprised they don't cost much more than a car. It looks mad.
Yeah.
So then we go from that very measured, reserved, quite quiet track into the first song that really feels like an IDLES song that we would know from before, with The Wheel.
Because that's the thing. This song is so kind of moody that when you go to the next song, you're kind of like shocked in a way. You go, what?
Completely.
What? And so I quite like that shock, because because it's like, you just finished hearing "You're Ready for the Storm" and kind of, quite like sad, and you're quite contemplative of life, and then he just starts. It's like, "Got on my knees."
Yeah, and it's their attempt to do a glam rock song. But they kind of made it so heavy that you almost lose that. But when I listen to it now, I can hear what they're getting at, and I can tell that that's what they're doing. It does sound like a glam rock song, but just made incredibly heavy and shouty. Because we've got our kind of moody, contemplative, downbeat intro that introduces that this album's going to have quite a sad theme to it, and then the second song, The Wheel, introduces exactly what that theme is going to be, which is addiction, and the wheel is the cycle of addiction.
Yeah.
And he's discussing, and in this article I read, he's talked about how, that first thing about getting on his knees and begging his mother, that's a real thing from his life, that's autobiographical.
Yeah.
As his mother struggled with addiction, and as has he struggled with addiction in his life. This song is classic IDLES greatness, I think. It's got amazing imagery. It's quite direct as well, in a way that maybe the first track doesn't quite bring in. It's got more of that repetition, and it's got him just asking again and again and again for a hallelujah, and this was pointed out in the Consequence of Sound article I read, not receiving one in response. He's just asking and asking, but no one's giving him what he wants. Which is interesting. Maybe it's a sort of a sign about where you might turn to if you're not getting that affirmation that you want. But yeah, I like this song. I think it's I think it works coming in straight after the first track.
Yeah.
And has a good sequel, and when they has a good sort of chorus and lyrics. And when they were doing their recent American tour, they weren't playing many songs off Crawler because it wasn't out yet, but they had announced it. Like their American tour that they've just done happened sort of between the announcement of Crawler, but before Crawler was released. So they weren't playing many tracks from it, but this is one of the ones they were playing. So I think that they sort of have faith in this track, and I think it would be a good song live as well, especially once people know it. And after I'd listened to the album a few times, I was walking around my flat just going, and so it turns, like that got stuck in my head, in a big way. So yeah, I like it. And I read they were talking about this song, but they talked about how the first half of the album is largely songs directly about different sort of types of trauma.
Yeah.
And then as it moves into the second half, that's when it starts sort of looking at the realization that something's wrong and then dealing with it, which is interesting, I thought. Do you like this track? What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. After the first track, this comes with like a high energy, high tempo, kind of the opposite of the track before. And so you kind of start mouthing the lyrics, but then you realize how tragic the lyrics are. You know, you start singing and it's like, I got on my knees and I begged my mother with a bottle in one hand. It's one or the other. And it's like, and it's just like, you can kind of sing the lyrics and then you realize that, he's talking to his alcoholic mother and asking her to choose. in a like choose on his knees. So that means he's like begging her. And it's just such a interesting, it's kind of like a bit of a mind blah. It's like you're kind of like driving the car and you're singing this song and then you realize that it's like this kid begging his mother to stop drinking and him not knowing where to turn or nobody helping him out. It's an amazing song. I really love it, but also you kind of go, oh, just you should not have enjoy listening to it. And yeah, I think that's one good thing about this album. It's so tragic, but also it's so good.
Yeah
Agreed.
And it's interesting you put that line about being on his knees and stuff. It's a repeated visual image in the album, is the idea of being down on your knees, and obviously the album's called Crawler. So that's something that will come back again and again. The third track is called When the Lights Come On, and after that big high energy second number, it pulls it back to somewhere probably halfway between MTT and The Wheel, with a song that the first like 2 or even 3 times I listened to the album, this for me was highlighted as one of the kind of weakest songs and one that I didn't really like. And it took a while to turn around on me, and now it's one of my highlights on the album. I love this track. It's about that feeling of the lights coming on in a club at the end of the night, the lights coming up and you see everyone in the harsh light of reality. And that feeling of maybe when you start to be a bit older and realise that everyone else there is 10 years younger than you. And maybe you're not in the right environment anymore. Which is definitely a feeling that I can empathise with and understand. Yeah. Of that feeling of being like, why am I here? Who are these people? They're awful. I don't like being here.
Yeah.
And it's got a great line about I black out. I don't want your dim sum.
I don't want your dim sum. Yeah.
Which is good. A good line. And yeah, it's just got this very sort of, I find this song almost hypnotic. It's 3 a.m. I want to dance till the sun comes. I want to fight your cousin. Like, just sort of It's got this like rolling thing, and again, he never kind of pushes his voice up into that screaming that he tends to, but it's just this very almost, considering the last song was called The Wheel, this song almost feels like a cyclical, like it's very sort of, it kind of just has this one speed it's running at for the whole song, but once you get into the groove of it, it really, really drags you along. I think I love this track. So yeah, I that's one of my highlights on the album is when the lights come on.
Yeah, I love this song because it's the one that kind of reminds me and has, although I know they're a Bristol band, I never kind of heard, I never kind of associated them with Bristol, and this kind of makes me feel the more Bristol of them because it's kind of experiences that I've had in Bristol. Like Bristol is a massive party city in the sense that you can, there's always something going on in Bristol, and there's always like a night or a club or anything. And then, you do that for a few years, and then you arrive to the point where you do it again at a certain age, and then you go, what the hell am I doing here? And it's exactly what they say here. It's like, what the hell am I doing here? And then it says, I want to fight with your cousin. It's just like, I don't know, like the because you've been in Bristol, a night out in Bristol, and it's not like the most mellow night, is it? It's quite like rowdy, and there are people that kind of start on you a little bit, and I guess anywhere in the UK, but I can
I mean Manchester's similar.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I can say that because I lived in Bristol, but I just I really like this song, and I like the sound of it. It's very different from Idols. It's kind of more like of a 80s kind of vibe. And I like where they're going because I think they're trying new things, and I think although their album is still deep and personal, this is deeper and more personal, but also they're kind of doing different things by still being Idols. So yeah, I think this is a great song and a great representation of your night in Bristol. And when you reach 27, you go, oh my goodness, why am I in this club right now?
I can agree with that.
I just want to be in a pub and go home at 11.
Yeah, exactly. Just a pub. That's all I need now. I don't need the club and the dim sum and the Spaniard man dancing. I mean, Spaniard men are fine, but not.
Yeah, they're fine. I just don't need to go to the next club. It's okay.
Yeah, let's chat in the pub rather than dance in the club. So yeah, we move on from that slightly mellower one to another new sound for Idols, but probably the most aggressive and abrasive that they've ever sounded, with the track Car Crash, which was the second single from the album. This sounds like, and I've seen multiple people make this comparison, and I think it's probably definitely inspired by the experimental hip-hop group Death Grips, who put out very aggressive, abrasive beats with a sort of this loud, kind of almost panicked rapping over the top of it. And that's what this track is. This is about as close to hip hop as they get. I mean, they've always circled, especially from Ultramono to this album, circled within the hip hop landscape. But this feels like a hip hop track. They created the drum beat by recording it onto a vinyl acetate and then playing it back, which causes the vinyl sort of is like a liquid, and it degrades as it's played, and that sort of helps to create this sort of fraying sensation with the song. And then the lyrics are just sort of this stream of consciousness, assault on the senses, lots and lots of uses of the word I did this, I got myself together, I got myself in check, I made myself a member, I got myself out of the red, I upgraded my upgrade, give us our daily bread, I got paid on payday, now I dress well fed, I clearly won the friendly, left my opponents dead, I got the keys. It just goes, it doesn't stop, there's no break in it. It's exactly the song that should be called Car Crash, because it just it just attacks you.
Yeah.
And the sort of, it's not even a chorus, but just the kind of the only break in the lyrics is when he goes, "Smash, I'm a car crash," and then straight back into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I this song is difficult not to love, in my opinion. I really, really like this track. It's got so much. There's too much in it to understand every line, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
But it means that every time you hear it, I pick out different bits.
Absolutely.
To kind of understand. The only lyric that I hear every single time I hear the song, the only lyric that like reliably jumps out at me is "racist prick on the right side, no one to trust on the left." For maybe obvious reasons in the UK at the moment, but it's great. What do you think of it?
I agree what you said, and it's just like a constant like, and it is very hip hop in a way that you just kind of you pick out what you want to, what you can hear or what you can understand. And I just read, which kind of makes sense, that what Joe Talbot wrote. It's like it's the horrific come down hangover, waking up in the morning and realizing the smash is like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? And it kind of I don't know, it kind of like, if you think about a hangover and a come down, which means he has taken drugs the night before, so it's kind of like a different kind of hangover. It's just it's a pretty interesting song, because also, after you have these kind of nights, then your come down, it also kind of affects you emotionally, mentally, physically, and your brain does go everywhere, and you do feel, and I think that is, that's what this is just him considering everything. And yeah.
And we've also got another mention of being on all fours. There's "you caught me on my knees, knees are raw red, you caught me on all fours, smooching the floor." So that repeated image again of being of crawling.
Yeah. No, it's an amazing song. It's a great song.
Yeah. And it was an interesting one too. It felt very specific that they released the Beachland Ballroom and this as the two singles, because it's the two sort of polar opposite, but the two most different songs from what normal Idols are, but they're also very different from each other. It made it very difficult to know what the album was going to be, hearing just those two tracks before it came out. So it's man, it's a song. And also I've been listening to this album on the way driving to and from work quite a bit, and
same.
It's a lot to have going at you when you're driving as well. It definitely feels like the sort of audio equivalent of a car crash, because it starts like, it gets you a bit sort of panicked and manic when it comes on. So yeah, no, it's a great song. That's Car Crash. Then we get into a song that I've got the most mixed feelings on, I think, on the album. The next track, The New Sensation. I don't like songs about a dance.
Song? What?
I don't like songs that are about a dance.
A dance?
Yeah, so for example, the Time Warp, the Macarena.
Okay.
The Harlem Shake.
Okay. Yeah.
I just find them annoying. I've never enjoyed songs about a dance, and I always hate being in a club or somewhere and one comes on and everyone starts doing the Macarena, or I don't like it. So this song, the first time I heard it, because like the first time I heard it, I was like, why have they just got this song about, like, Um, it's just like do the new sensation, do the new sensation, shimmy real hard like you Richard Pryor, lie like I didn't get anything from it beyond just everybody stand up for a bit, get up on your feet and get down for a bit, shake it to the snare and get down to the kick, shake your tiny tushy like you don't give a shit, and I just sort of I was like, I don't understand what this is meant to be about or what it's meant to be doing. And then after I listened to it a few times, I heard the second verse jumped out to me, which is, so you want to
So
retrain
you
now,
want to
jumping
retrain
from the
now?
right
Yeah.
to the left brain now.
Yeah.
You just got to change your stance up and retrain as a
Yeah.
dancer. And then when I read the Consequence of Sound article from them and they mentioned it specifically, it's about Rishi Sunak, who's the,
Yeah.
I don't know what he is, the Chancellor. He's an MP
What
in
is
charge
it?
of money.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he said in the pandemic that people who work in the
Yeah.
arts and creative industries should retrain and get jobs in
Yeah.
different industries, which is
Yeah.
offensive, awful,
Mhm.
assumes that it's that simple for someone who's dedicated their life to one thing to just change to
Yeah.
something else, and that there's enough jobs to support that, to support an entire industry of people suddenly changing industries. And also is also assuming that in a time of hardship like the pandemic, that there's no value in art, which is not true. More than ever before, almost, like Netflix, like all of these places that people go to for entertainment were more required than ever during the pandemic, because without that it was a daily grind of nothing, of repeating the same thing, staying in your house. Like we needed entertainment and the arts, and to just say, oh, is awful. And so I like the song more, obviously, seeing that it's a reaction to that, but I still think it's not got enough connection to that idea for me. There's that one verse about it, and then the rest of the song is largely him going, do the new sensation. And any song that's like, do the something, do the time walk, do the Macarena, I just find it annoying. And I know that this is almost joking about it and being ironic, and I get the idea of wanting an almost funny song at this point in the album set list, makes sense. But I do the something I'm not keen on. What do you think of this song?
Like, one thing that this album does is that it doesn't, like, it has different beat songs attached. So you have Car Crush that is very like kind of like very kind of, the beat is kind of slow and repetitive, and then and it's kind of like it's a list, and so it just goes and goes, and then and with all different lyrics, and then this song comes out and is a very high tempo repetitive song where he repeats the same things over and over again, which is do the new sensation. So already that change kind of like shifts gears while you're listening. So in a way I found that enjoyable even before kind of listening to the song. The verse 2 is the one that really I got straight away, where it says, so you want to retrain now, what you were talking about, because I was just reading an article about I read an article just before listening to this album about this person saying, oh, I don't think that COVID has changed you, don't think you can be an artist now. Like, it was an article on those lines. And in a way, that article and what Rishi Sunak said is a kind of like, it's like, you can change, you can be whatever you want. And so don't listen to people saying that because COVID has arrived, you can be different, because I think you can be different anytime. You can do whatever you want. But also don't think that because I'm an artist, I can do anything else. You know what I mean? Does it make sense what I'm saying? Yeah. And so I like this song because when I listen to these lyrics, it makes sense, and it kind of like it's COVID. It's what COVID is about, and what COVID is about is what, how people have felt and what people have experienced during COVID. So I like this song. I think it's quite ironic and quite, he's saying do the new sensation, but it's kind of in a very kind of punky way, and so it's not fun. You kind of imagine somebody doing the new sensation. What kind of dance is the new sensation? I kind of imagine somebody like, having a sort of seizure dance, because like do the new sensation, da 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 da, So yeah, I really like this song. It might not be my favorite, but I think it's a well constructed song, in my opinion. And yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then I sing it along when I'm in the car,
Oh, yeah. Do the new sensation.
Everybody stand up for a bit. Get up on your feet and get down for a bit. Shake it.
I just don't like singing about dancing. That's my own problem, though. I can't blame the band for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'll never enjoy do the as lyrics, if you see what I mean. Do the whatever. But never mind.
Yeah.
So that's my own personal issue. Not nothing to do with IDLES. They've crafted another great song. Stockholm Syndrome.
Yes.
Stockholm Syndrome, probably one of the more commonly known hostage-based syndromes, is where somebody sort of begins to empathise with their captor in a hostage situation. This song is supposed to be like a sort of angry marching band song, according to the band. Which is interesting and not something I've not found my way into seeing it from that angle yet. I'm not quite sure what that means. To me, it sounds like an IDLES song, which is a fine thing. I think that this song is the most sort of lyrically poetic track on the album, because it's the song that I'm still listening to and reading lyrics to and still sort of trying to understand it. It's the most complex song, I think, lyrically. What do you think?
I was just listening now whilst, and the lyric that stands out for me more is when it goes, I've royalist and a drug user walking to a bar, both guys have capped drinks, a cousin the other's gone too far. Like it's but that's the only one that really stands out to me when I listen and to the song, and when I listen to the entire song, I'm reading the lyrics now and I just didn't understand them.
I think it's partly to do with the dangers of judging people for their addictions, because it makes you a hypocrite, because you yourself will always have similar things, even if it's not drug addiction. Because so I guess there's an idea of, like, he says he's a pacifist, quaking on a pile of collected things, tearing at his infant lungs. Like, is that a reference to people like me, I suppose, that judge people for being very militaristic and that or maybe judge people for being drug addicts, which I don't do, but then are addicted to collecting tat. Like, I have a large collection of tat, in the form of Funko Pops and Blu-rays and things. And is that, equally a ridiculous addiction that I should stop? I don't know. I don't know if I'm interpreting it wrong, or if there's another, like, it's got a lot going on. Like, there's one reference to something called Hume's guillotine, which is a philosophical problem that Genius is just now enlightening me to what it means, and it's something to do with using facts to justify morals, because your moral beliefs are your own and not anyone else's. Which I kind of think I can see what he's getting at, but again, I mean, it's very dense. It's a very dense song that I and especially paired with the new sensation, this is probably my this is the low point of the album for me, and not a low point in terms of I think it's bad, but certainly the point that I'm least invested in the album is these two songs back to back.
Yeah, there's
What
a
do you
in the
think?
chorus, when he says, just give them enough rope, how can I feel myself when I can't even feel my face? Like, I thought that might be, because this is the middle of the album, isn't it? This is track number 6, nearly the middle of the album. There are 14 tracks in the album.
But if you consider that
And
two of those tracks aren't really tracks entirely,
yeah,
it really is the midpoint, isn't it?
yeah. And when he says, how can I feel myself when I can't even feel my face? Like, I think this might be something to do with drug use. You know, when somebody takes
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
drugs, and so I think he's considering how he's, you know, he doesn't know exactly how he is, and I think maybe that's why this is such a complex song, because it's just he doesn't even know, I think.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, and the chorus kind of like stands out quite a bit. It's like,
Just
because
give
it's like I've got more stories to tell, but I
them.
can't remember time nor place. So he's just like in a probably in a drug induced stupor, and that's why he doesn't know how he feels, because that's what drugs do. After a while, you abuse them. So
Yeah, but the song,
yeah,
the song is sort of about not necessarily judging people for their addictions. So I suppose
yeah,
judgment
because
isn't going to help anyone, is it? It's
yeah.
better to kind of support than judge.
Yeah, because you don't know where they came from. You know, I didn't realize his mother suffered from an addiction, and that's probably why he is suffering from drug addiction, and it's all it's all a spiral. And definitely don't judge people, and people do judge people that take drugs. It's really a big thing.
Yeah, but then is he
Yeah.
also saying, you shouldn't judge equally? It's why would you judge a royalist? Which is a knottier issue for me, because I would judge people for not addictions necessarily, but for disagreeing with my view of the world. It's very easy to judge people. So is that part of the message of the song as well, or it's a complicated one, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's also interesting. It's probably this is an appropriate time to mention that he's said in interviews recently that they're not going to play Model Village live now. This track off Ultramono, because he thinks he was in the wrong place and was angry at the wrong people and chose the wrong targets when he wrote that song.
Okay.
Because that is a very judgmental song about a certain type of small-minded British person. But I'm probably not as far along whatever journey he's on, because I still feel like the people he discusses in the song Model Village are people that I would judge and dislike. So it's complex. He's made it's far less black and white than previous, particularly in Ultramono, where none of the songs felt like they'd have this ambiguity to them. Which I like. I don't love this song yet, but I like that it exists on this album, and that the album has space for songs like this on it.
Yeah.
But moving on, we get to the first single, the lead single for the album, the Beachland Ballroom, which is named after a real place, a venue in Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, called the Beachland Ballroom. And I think the story is that IDLES were playing a smaller venue, and Joe looked into the Beachland Ballroom and started to think about the fact that they are moving up to playing bigger venues, and in those bigger venues they can maybe be more creative and have more freedom to try different things, and rather than be defined by what they have been in the past. Which links musically to the track, because musically this is unlike anything IDLES have ever done before.
No.
They've described it repeatedly in interviews as a soul song. But interestingly doesn't link lyrically with what the song is about. The song's lyrics are really, really about trauma, and sort of coming in the centre point of the album, the lyrics really feel like they're trying to, within one song, sum up the overall theme of the album.
Yeah.
Which is, makes sense that it was released as a as the lead single. And again, we've got more lyrics about being on knees. I was on my knees for days, and then I sat on all fours, and I made.
Mm.
I'm not praying, baby. I'm not
Yeah.
begging, darling. Yeah.
Yeah.
It, it it's incredible.
Yeah.
I really love this song. Unexpected. Not what you expect to hear from IDLES at all. And just so, like, they put out 2 music videos for this song. The first music video is the camera right close up on Joe Talbot's face. That's the only thing you see is his face, and his mouth takes up the entire camera shot, basically. The second track they put out is a shot of the whole band performing the song. And that track much more illustrates how little some members of the band have to do in this song. The drumming is quite. Well, I don't want to sort of sound like I'm. It's not as knotty and complex, I don't think, as some previous IDLES work, and it's certainly they're not doing as much as they usually do. The band, and a lot of it is on Joe, the singer, and it reminded me a little bit of when you read interviews with Radiohead talking about Kid A, and how certain members of the band had to, like, that could have been the making or breaking of Radiohead, that album, because people like Phil Selway, the drummer in Radiohead, had to sort of come to terms with what's my place in a Radiohead song that doesn't have drums in it. What do I do in that circumstance? And they sort of discovered as a band how to continue with a sound that isn't the traditional rock sound, and obviously this isn't quite to that degree, but certainly it's interesting to see the band being comfortable with doing tracks that maybe don't utilize all of them all the time in the way that maybe previous albums did, and that level of restraint and knowing when to be restrained sort of makes everything more powerful as a result of it. The things around it where they do go all in feel bigger and more intense as a result of these songs where they sort of strip themselves back a little bit, which I like.
I guess it gives also like a sense of trust, and not of like nobody's more important than anybody else, like
Yeah,
and although you can't hear me now, you can't, a particular member of the band is not as noticeable now, like living with that without being frustrated with that, and just going, well, it's all part of the process of being a band,
yeah, definitely. And then lyrically,
yeah
it's about damage. It's about being at your lowest ebb, I think, from the trauma of various things. I don't know if this song specifies addiction as being the source of any trauma. It's just, it could be any number of things that have led to the character in this song being, because also this album, more than other albums, well, I don't know, actually. At times it feels very personal to Joe Talbot, the singer, and at other times, like this song, it can feel a bit more character based and maybe not specifically about him, or could be applied to other people, which is interesting. And yeah, it's just quite a beautiful, soulful meditation on damage and trauma, and I don't know that there's much else to say beyond it's just a great song.
I guess anyone that has suffered any kind of trauma could relate to this song without having the same trauma, it's just anybody can relate, because it's just talking about, the silence ringing for days, the wind that turns the trees, made me sway, made me sway, made me sway. It's just, it could be anything. It could be however you're feeling at that particular moment in time. When he says damage, it's just such a, I don't know. It's like damage. It's just so powerful.
Yeah.
Like it's not a up tempo song. It doesn't use, like you said, it's not as powerful musically, but lyrically and how it is made is such a amazing song and so um meaningful. Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. And then we get into Crawl with an exclamation point on it. This is my second favourite track on the album.
Of course,
Why, of course?
because it's one of the noisiest. It's really
It is.
noisy. It's
It
like
is very
you like the
noisy.
noisy ones. I'm like more like the the ones that are just kind of this is really noisy. It's like da 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 da.
Yeah, yeah. And I just like, there's some really good, like, I like it when he uses very visual imagery and visual metaphors that really stick in my mind. And I always picture, in the line where it's, God damn, I'm feeling good, said the liar to the congregation. That just immediately creates an image in my head of somebody, like, I think that those two lines just say so much. You know, somebody who's all front, making out that they're on top of the world, but, you know, said the liar to the congregation. Clearly they're not. I love that line. And then when he goes, and yeah, I'm a crawler. Crawling hurts, but it worked. Like, it just, it gets me going. I love it. I absolutely love this song. It's described by the band as the turning point of the album. After the crash, you're now you're a crawler. You're on your hands and knees, and you're starting that journey of self-realization and knowing where you are and understanding what's happened to you, and beginning to be a bit defiant about it, which I think is really, I love that this album has a journey, and you can feel it happening
definitely.
within this song, particularly as he starts to kind of build up and realize what's, he wants to escape from this cycle, possibly. And yeah, like you said, it's a big, loud, punky, classic Idol song.
Yeah.
It feels like, because up to this point we've had a few aggressive, loud songs like Car Crash and The Wheel, but like The Wheel, the Wheel's got that glam rock edge to it where it doesn't 100% feel like an Idol song. Car Crash is loud and aggressive, but it's hip hop more than it is Idol's traditional, like what you expect. The New Sensation has got that dance beat thing going on. Stockholm Syndrome. The lyrics are what stop it from feeling like kind of classic Idols, and this is all good things that these songs don't feel like classic Idols. But when you get to Crawl and you start that journey back up, it's interesting that it's the first song, I think, on the album that truly, it's got that visual imagery that he uses in old Idol songs. Musically, it sounds the closest to classic Idols, I think, that you found on the album. Yeah, it's got the exclamation point in the title, and it's great. I love it. What do you think of this song?
No, it's yeah, it is definitely a turn, and he talks about, he says, I'm all right, when he goes, I'm all right, and then he goes, I'm feeling mighty fucking fake, and it is, and it is them, isn't it? This is definitely like their noisy selves, which, of course, how can you not like this song? If you like Idols, you're gonna love this song. But I know this is definitely a song that you would enjoy because it's just noisy. But again, every song is next to a song that is very different, and
oh yeah, definitely, because
and it's amazing, but still going on the same journey. I wonder what it means, like, God damn, I'm feeling good, said the liar to the congregation. I wonder who's the liar.
The addict who's still in that place of not being able to admit that they're an addict, maybe.
So they're saying, like, I'm feeling good, and saying that they're not addicts anymore, and then they still are.
I mean, there's an annotation on Genius. I don't know who wrote it for that line that says, "This song takes place in a manic space where the singer has begun finding ways to cope with their trauma, even if they aren't necessarily healthy. They insist that they're fine, better than fine, despite the instability of their emotional state. They're screaming their insurances, desperately trying to prove what they know isn't true." But at least they've made. I can kind of see what they mean by that. I think that's probably accurate. And yeah, it's through this song is where they start to self-actualize a bit and realize that they are a crawler. Crawling hurts, but it works for me, etc.
Could it be also like it is the turning point, but could it be also, him telling himself that he's alright even if he hasn't reached that point yet?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. But I think there's also an element of like, there's that probably. I mean, I've never been. I mean, the whole problem with this podcast entirely is that I've not had the experiences of addiction and trauma that he has, so I can't speak from experience. But I imagine there's probably a feeling of ecstasy just when you make that initial realization that you want to make a change, and you'll go all in manically, determined to make that change. Whereas maybe the next song is where the come down starts to happen a little bit, and they start to maybe find healthier ways or I don't know, we'll talk about the song, but maybe less manic ways of starting to think about long-term recovery.
Yeah. Well, I guess like any kind of trauma, when something happens and you go, I'm okay, and then you realize after that you are not okay because you could have died.
Yeah.
I just know this from, like, the only way I can relate is when I got hit by a car. And I stood up and I apologized to the person that hit me. And I was like, I was fine. And then I had really bad, I think I texted you as well. I was like, yeah, I'm okay. I just got hit by a car.
Yeah, it was quite a panic. It was quite a scary text message.
But then I did have really bad, like, I had like it took me a few years to not have like the feeling of somebody coming from my right and hitting me.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
And so I think, but although you go with because you don't want to, also you don't, I think the other thing, what I think this song is just when people ask you, are you okay? And because you don't want to bother them, you go, oh yeah, of course I'm fine. And you want to be fine because you have to be fine, don't you? But then, and then you go home and you're by yourself and you're actually like not fine. I don't know. I think that's how I can relate to this song a little bit.
Yeah.
Sorry, I went on a tangent.
No, it was a good tangent. The next track is more sort of not as much so, but closer to Stockholm Syndrome again for me, where I know what they say the song is about, and I'm still wrapping my mind around finding that within the lyrics myself, if that makes sense. The next song is called Meds, and is again a fairly IDLES-y song. Another one that we can expect from IDLES traditionally. And is according to them about the cycle of recovery, but is also about imposter syndrome and not trying to normalize people who shouldn't have to feel normal, or what is normal, and how everyone can feel like they're an imposter. My friend sent me a brilliant sort of meme about this recently in terms of imposter syndrome and thinking that everyone else knows what they're doing when nobody knows what they're doing, and it was. I think it was so Andy Samberg, and let me find the image because it was quite useful. Yeah, so it's an interview with Bill Hader, who was on Saturday Night Live, and he's talking about Andy Samberg and their audition to be on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah,
and he's saying, I actually went up the elevator with Andy Samberg. That was when we met, when we were going to our auditions. He had a backpack on full of tons of props, and I was looking at him going, oh no, I don't have any props. Oh man, that guy's got props. And then he said he was looking at me going, that guy doesn't have any props. He doesn't need props. Why do I have props? And somebody's written underneath, I feel like this is pretty much the most accurate way to describe life as an adult. And that whatever you're doing, if you see somebody doing something different to you, just assume that they know what's going on and you don't.
Yeah.
And they're probably looking at you being like, why are they doing that? Why am I doing this? That's not... So...
Absolutely.
I think it just, we should sort of normalize imposter syndrome more, because I think everyone, other than people who are maybe sociopathically incapable of seeing the world from someone else's point of view, I think most people experience imposter syndrome to one degree or another. I experience it to an overwhelming degree. But I don't know where in the lyrics to this song Meds, I can't find my way into this being about imposter syndrome. Do you see what I mean? Beyond, there's a bridge near the end where it says, I'm crazy about my baby, but I'm crazier inside. I've got plenty who'd come and save me, but I choose to run and hide. Could be around it. What do you think of this track?
I love the bit when he says medicate, meditate, medicate.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's really interesting, because you sometimes hear meditate all the time or medicate, and I feel that's interesting because you conquer addiction or trauma with medication, which can cause other things, but so they say to meditate, and you shouldn't really go on the medical side, but that's the kind of most helpful. And meditation takes a while. Medication is quite fast.
Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine I can see them both being fairly, reasonable ways of getting over certain types of addiction potentially. But I can see the kind of visual idea of somebody who is who goes through that cycle of addiction, having almost the medication and then the meditation being part of that cycle that is then broken, and they go back to the start. And I can imagine them having conversations with their friends, being like, "Oh, it's okay, I'm medicating again now, and I'm meditating." So, and then it sort of repeats, which is quite a sad and upsetting idea. But I think maybe there's an element of that idea to what this song is about. Yeah, I'm less sure. Maybe I'm a moron, but I'm less sure about the imposter thing, about where that comes in. I guess class guilt got me here.
Yeah, that was like a smash pills, feel no fear. And then after says, drugs lost what I had found, burned friendships to the ground, turned my frown upside down.
Or maybe again, I've got plenty who'd come and save me, but I choose to run and hide, in terms of maybe feeling like nobody cares.
Yeah.
And why would anybody be interested? How much are you allowing that idea of like you're an imposter that nobody's interested in? Whereas really people would kind of help you out. It's again, I think musically I like this track more than Stockholm Syndrome. So I like this song more than Stockholm Syndrome. But again, with the lyrics, I don't think they're bad. I think they're just going to take a longer time to sort of coalesce for me. Yeah. We move on to the shortest track on the album next. It's entirely instrumental, and it's called Kalechi.
Kalechi.
And the sort of sad element to this is that Kalechi is apparently the name of a friend of Joe Talbot's who killed himself last year, which is obviously, really upsetting and traumatic and tragic. And it is I suppose it's a very beautiful sort of short 30-second piece of music that is a nice tribute to this friend of Joe Talbot's, to sort of name it after him, which is a nice touch for Joe. And it's the introduction to the following track, Progress. It was written to be an extended intro to that song, so it comes before Progress, and it works as appropriately as a buffer between a very loud, traditionally IDLES sounding song and then Progress, which is probably musically the most far from IDLES sound on the whole album, I think. Do you have anything else to say about this track, Kalechi, before we talk about Progress?
No, it's just a really. I didn't realize it was a different song. I thought Collection Progress were the same song.
Yeah, well, I feel it goes.
Yeah.
They segue into each other completely.
Yeah, so I didn't realize there were, because I listened to it on Spotify in my car. I don't look at the tracks, and I didn't realize. Yeah. I was just having thoughts about meds and maybe how the imposter syndrome comes, and then this comes after. Maybe imposter syndrome is he didn't really have trauma. He assumed that could be an imposter thing.
Convincing himself he didn't have trauma.
Yeah. But no, him convincing himself that maybe he had trauma, but maybe he didn't really have trauma because he's now okay. I don't know. Just because, like, if the next track is about his friend committing suicide, I wonder if he's feeling like an imposter, that maybe he wasn't really he wasn't as bad as he thought he was. I don't know. Just a thought
Possibly.
I had now.
Yeah.
Who knows?
The next track is called Progress.
Yeah.
And it's a mantra. And it is my favourite track on the album. I love this song from the first time I heard it. I absolutely adored it. It's one of the most beautiful pieces of music I've heard in my life. I think I adore this song. And it's these sort of repeated. He sort of repeats the following lines again and again throughout the whole song. As heavy as my bones were, I don't want to feel myself get high, 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 come. As light as your grace was, I don't want to feel myself come down, high, come, home, to. And it sort of goes on like that. And it's, I think it's meant to be that moment of realisation, and the mantra to help him realise and come to terms with that he doesn't want to go back into that addiction and that trauma again and go back through that cycle, that he wants to break it. And that feeling of, I think I've heard people to talk before about when they're coming down from drugs and trying to get rid of drugs, that their bones feel heavy. Yeah. And he's saying, as heavy as my bones were, I don't want to feel myself get high. Like having to will himself into breaking it and not wanting to do it. And not wanting, maybe as light as your grace was, is that sort of, is he talking to the idea of drugs there, and the feeling lightness and the kind of elation and ecstasy sensation, but he doesn't want to feel the after effects anymore. He doesn't want to feel himself come down anymore, and he wants to break it. And it just repeats that over and over again over this very beautiful music, which contains a binaural beat. A binaural beat is where you play two tracks. Do you know what a binaural beat is?
I guess it's like two different beats on the same track.
Yeah, but it's a certain thing. Let me get it up again, because it's two different frequencies playing. So two beats at different frequencies, and it sort of creates a brainwave. And so they've used a frequency that's meant to engender forward thinking and self-reflection. And having a binaural beat like that underneath a song called Progress with those lyrics, I think the whole thing comes together in a way that's perfect. And again, is another song where certain members of the band, I imagine, had to be comfortable with their not being a huge part of that track and finding their way of contributing, which is I love it. I really, really love this song. And I like, if I'm driving and I get to where I'm going and this song starts, I have to stay in the car until it finishes. It's great.
Yeah. Oh, it's a really beautiful song. It's really, really beautiful. And that's all I have to say. It's just and he's realised that he doesn't want to be high anymore. Even though he's as light as Your Grace was, as much as I loved it. He doesn't want to
Yeah,
feel the
come down.
come down. No, it's beautiful. It's definitely not an idol sound, and
Yeah,
I think they're being very brave with their fourth album, although they're still being themselves. I feel like there's a good mixture of sounds and
yeah, definitely.
production and lyrics that are so much deeper than Ultra Mono.
Mm. And it's interesting when Ultramono came out in interviews, they were saying, we can't do this again. We can't make another album that sounds like this.
Yeah.
We're going to have to do something different next time.
Yeah.
Which I took to mean, they're going to go away for a little bit and come back in 2 or 3 years, not a year later. And have genuinely followed up on what they said they were going to do, which is amazing. So Progress is a great song. We come from Progress into Progress probably being the lightest and sparsest song on the album.
Yeah.
Into the heaviest song on the album, a 30-second long hammer to the head called Whiz, which has not many lyrics. It goes 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 P1 rocket fuel bang bang off the train Peruvian flake pink champagne, and
that's it.
Those lyrics are entirely constructed from old text messages from Joe Talbot's drug dealer, and I think it's meant to. I think it's meant to represent sort of temptation, and the idea that, because he mentions the idea that he would have blocked the number, or not blocked the number, he deleted the number from his contacts list, but not blocked the number, so the texts still come through to sort of tempt him to go back into that cycle after the some kind of self-actualization, realization moment from Progress. He's immediately hit with these very heavy, big temptations, these sort of texts from a dealer. Which is interesting, and I kind of think, again, just the sequencing of the songs on the album has been really carefully considered, and I think it works perfectly. And that song Progress, bookended by 2 very different 30-second sort of oral snippets, again, works really well, I think. So yeah, that's Whiz.
Yeah.
And then we get into the final 2 songs on the album, starting with King Snake.
Mm-hmm.
And King Snake, one of the closest to Ultra Mono, I think, because it's got one idea, and he's repeating that idea again and again and again using different images. So I'm the Duke of Nothing, I'm the Sultan of Sands, I'm the King of Diddley, I'm the Shell of a Man, the Emperor of Zip, the Leader of Naught, the God of Zilch, a Vacuum of Thought. That's the first verse, and it's effectively the same line repeated again and again and again. The idea being, he is nothing. But I think the song is supposed to be about owning that fact, like that being a positive thing. To realise that you're nothing, that you're not important in the grand scheme of things is almost a Buddhist idea, they've described it as. And there's a lot of power in making that realisation and realising, that you're nothing. And there's an interesting line in it, I think, right near the end. So he said, the final verse is, a drop in the ocean, a shadow in the night, a wheel with no motion, a dog with no bite, deputy manager's assistant, don't like, don't listen, yeah. And I think that final that final bit, to me, is almost a comment on the people who criticise IDLES and Joe Talbot in particular for sort of being very sloganeering and being very preachy and thinking that they're more important. He's, kind of self-important lyrics. I think this whole song is partly a little bit. This album's much less a reaction to the critics than Ultra Mono was, which had entire songs dedicated to it. But this bit, I think, some of that's slipping in with the idea that he's saying, I'm not important, I'm no one, I don't matter more than anyone else. If you don't like what I have to say, don't listen to me. I'm not going to force you to.
Absolutely.
Which I think is interesting, that it just squeezes it in at the very end of this song, rather than, you had a song like Mr. Motivator on Ultra Mono. The entire song is about his reaction to kind of critics of his lyrics. I like this song. It's good. It doesn't do a lot. It's very simple. No. But I like it. What do you think of it?
I completely agree with what you said. Is the realization that whatever anybody says really doesn't really matter. Don't put an energy on me. And the fact that he had so much, this band has got so much criticism, even from people that kind of have the same ideas as them is the classic thing that now is divide and conquer, isn't it? It's just like let's divide people with the same ideas because maybe they're not as working class as me. And we talked about it before. Instead of like uniting and saying, yeah, we have the same ideas, we might preach them in different ways, but let's unite and conquer. No?
Yeah, definitely. Although they do have a song called "Divide and Conquer" on their first album.
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
agree.
But that's the thing. It's like it's a thing of a society from forever that we have to divide people even with similar ideas, because if too many people with similar ideas come together, then maybe there'll be a change. No. And so let's criticize these guys, but why? Don't pay attention. And he's right. Don't listen. If I'm that bad, just don't listen. Go away. And
Agreed.
yeah. So great song. It's a good song.
And one person who wanted lots of people to come together with a similar idea to change things was Marxist communist revolutionary Leon Trotsky.
Mm-hmm.
Who is very relevant to the final track, The End.
The End.
The End. Trotsky knew that Joseph Stalin's assassins were going to murder him. He knew that he was on the hit list and he didn't have long left, and he was staring down the barrel of his own death.
Yeah.
And he sat in his garden one day and watched his wife in the garden, and he wrote in his diary, "In spite of it all, life is beautiful."
Yeah.
And then a week later, he was dead. He was gone, which is interesting. I think Joe Talbot's obviously, or somebody in the band has kind of read this story and heard this and really connected with that idea. And I think it is a beautiful idea just a really, I love. I'm not much of a poetry person, but I really, really love I love it when a lyricist or a poet is able to, in just maybe a handful of lines, 2 lines, create an entire essay's worth of ideas, if you see what I mean. And like that those 2 lines, "In spite of it all, life is beautiful," is just such a beautiful idea. And it is the chorus to this final track, The End. And was also used in a lot of the early promotional stuff for this album before the album itself had officially been announced. Signs had been going up, particularly in Bristol. I think there was a big sign outside. Is it Temple Meads? Is the main train station in Bristol? There's a big sign outside there that just said, "In spite of it all, life is beautiful," kind of hinting at the return of IDLES. And it's a really just a gorgeous lyric, and the song as a whole is just this big, loud, we've done it, we've achieved what we wanted, empowering, self-actualized assault, basically, and say, cuts like a knife, stings like a tick, kicks like a mule, I'm back, I'm here, I'm powerful again, and I'm ready to go. And in spite of everything I've been through, in spite of all of those traumas and that addiction, life is beautiful.
Yeah.
Which I think sometimes, whether it's from trauma, addiction, or something else, it's easy to get into that mode in your head where the world is just a bad, sad, terrible place. And this line, I think, is almost a mantra that can help you to remember that, in spite of all that, there is still beautiful things happening in the world. So it's a great way to end the album. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I agree fully. What a boring person. I fully agree with what you say. Yeah,
good.
He's come out of the other way. He has maybe become a little bit more positive in his in how he is, and accepting more of other people's not judging people too much. He has come to terms with his addiction and the things that he did wrong. And in the end, he, whatever bad thing is happening, life is beautiful. Yeah, no, it's really good ending to a really good album.
Yeah, that is the album. That is Crawler by IDLES, the fourth album by IDLES, and that is every track on it. So, I mean, overall, how do you feel about the album as a whole?
I absolutely loved it. Love it. I've listened to it all week, and I've how long is the album? About 45 minutes. How long is the album?
Yeah, it's about 47 minutes or so.
Yeah, so I've got about an hour drive to work and an hour drive back from work, and listen to this album twice a day, and discovering more and more of this album each time. It's really beautiful, and they did a really good thing, and they've gone out of their comfort zone. They've grown up a little bit, even in a year, or he's grown up. Maybe he's more self-aware.
Yeah, definitely.
And definitely more poetic, and just different. And I really loved it. I think it's a really great album.
Nice.
Yes. What did you think?
I think it's brilliant. I love it. A lot of my favourite bands like Radiohead, bands like, well, a lot of my favourite bands anyway. I can't think of many great examples, but Radiohead are definitely a good example. Are bands that will, Manic Street Preachers are true as well to a degree. They will try different things. They will have albums that have different sounds, and they'll experiment and try and push themselves forward. And when I loved IDLES, when I first loved IDLES, they hadn't really signified that was who they were going to be. But with this album, I think they're showing that they're here to stay for a long time.
Yeah.
And that you aren't necessarily going to know what to expect from them, which is exactly what I want from a band that I love. So yeah, I love this album. I love most of the tracks on it. The tracks I don't love, I'm sure I'll get into eventually, and it's great. And I think at the moment, like right now, the way I feel about all of the albums is I would rank. I'll do a quick ranking of the 4 IDLES albums for you. So, in at number 4 is Ultra Mono.
Okay.
Which I like that album a lot, but I definitely go back to it less than the others. I think just because it is very one note to a degree, it doesn't have a lot of texture necessarily, but it's probably got some of their best songs, but as an album, it's the least sort of cohesive. In at number 3, Brutalism, their debut album, which I love to pieces and completely adore. Number 2, Joy is an Act of Resistance, and then at the moment, sitting at number 1 is this album, Crawler. I think it's the best thing they've done.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know if you've listened to the earlier albums enough to do a ranking of your own.
No,
but that's
not at
that's
all.
how I feel. That's
I definitely I know I've listened to Ultra Mono and this more, and I think this has definitely surpassed Ultra Mono.
That's good because you really liked Ultra Mono.
Yeah. But I feel I can relate to this album more.
Yeah.
And it just, I can just relate to this album more. And as a lyric writer, it's written beautifully.
Yeah.
And so yeah, definitely. I'll have to listen to the other 2 a little bit more.
Yeah, you definitely should. They're both really good. I mean, Joy is an Act of Resistance is a masterpiece. And Brutalism is close to a masterpiece as well. I mean, they're both so good. Yeah, and I can't wait to see what they do next. I can't imagine that we'll get another album next year. That surely is too much for anyone to do.
That would be like a Rihanna move. She used to release 1 album a year.
Yeah. The Fall did it for 30 years somehow. The post-punk icons The Fall did an album a year for 30 years. Yeah.
Wow.
I can't see them doing that, but
No.
I don't mind if they take a little break now and let this one sink in and then decide where they want to head next. But I'm seeing them live in January, which I'm so excited about, especially now with this album to kind of incorporate into their set list. I can't wait to see what it's like.
Have you seen them live before?
Yeah, I saw them about 2 months ago. They doing a small gig to promote the release of Ultra Mono, which should have been almost a year earlier, if you see what I mean. but it got delayed and eventually happened then. And then I saw them just before Ultramono was announced. Oh no, I saw them in like November of 2019, I think.
Okay.
On the end of the tour for Joys and Acts of Resistance, which was good, but I was very sick, so I didn't really get to fully enjoy it. I'm always sick for some reason.
You're always sick.
A sickly person.
I guess you have to wear. I guess you have to wear a mask more often.
Sure. I don't have COVID, so. And yeah, there we go. That's our feelings on Crawler. It's an absolute blast. Please listen to it if you haven't listened to it.
Yeah.
Quick coda on just general music chat. Have you listened to the re-release of Red at all, or have you been entirely?
No, I haven't actually.
Oh, it's good, man. It's a good album. Yeah, there's a Phoebe Bridgers track on it in like the bonus stuff that's really good. And I've never properly listened to Red because I sort of got into the Taylor Swift bandwagon with 1989. So it's been fun to visit that for the first time properly and hear it, which, yeah, is cool. So, yeah, there we go. So that was episode 56, Crawler. I hope you've enjoyed it. We've had a great time talking about that album. Next week, please come back and join us for the best of 2021 is what we're going to talk about next week. Our favourite films, TV series, music, maybe video games from me that were released in the calendar year of 2021. It's going to be an absolute blast, so please do listen in. So if you're hearing this on the day it comes out, you might just have time to announce to send us a list, but other than that, you're probably going to be too late. But please, I hope you have sent a list in earlier. But yeah, best of 2021 next week. It's going to be a blast celebrating what has been a fairly strong year for pop culture.
Yeah.
With some good stuff to sort of just go through and just say that we enjoyed it and celebrate the new year coming. And then in the new year, you can expect loads of more great Culture Bucket coming your way, including a deep dive on The French Dispatch, Wes Anderson's latest magnum opus, and also Alex is going to watch all of the Spider-Man movies, and we'll do an episode where she tells us what she thought about those, and that's going to be a good time as well. So, so please stick with us next year for that one. Thank you so much. I adore you and love you, and so does Alex. And bye.